In this section, I'd like to cover creating 3D text in Amorphium. Now, the way you would go about doing that is, since it is creating an object, it will be in your Composer window, and it's on the object creation portion of the toolbar. So as you see here, this little T on the toolbar here, that is the text creation tool. All you have to do to create text is to select that tool and then click somewhere out in 3D space. And what that'll do is bring up the font man, as it's called in Amorphium, which actually lets you create 3D text from a font that's installed in your machine. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just choose Century Gothic. And let's type lynda.com. And we'll go ahead and make it bold. And now you'll notice too that you're seeing kind of a preview of what the shape of the font is here. If I say filled, what that'll do is anywhere there's a hole, it will actually make it solid. And then italicize. If the font has italicized built into the font, then it will let you italicize it. Now you can choose a bevel and depth. 50 is a little bit strong, it would be really deep font. So I'm just going to make this 12. And you can choose to have a bevel or not. If you don't want a bevel, just make that 0. I'm going to go ahead and choose bevel, and under the quality setting, this is how dense your object is as far as the quality of the mesh. If you're going to do a lot of deformations to your text, I would suggest going to a higher setting. And then you have the colors, the basic colors for the faces, the bevels, and the sides. It defaults to red, yellow, and blue, but you can change this to be whatever you want it to be by just choosing your color picker. I'm going to leave it the colors that are there for right now, so you can visually see the bevel, faces, and sides easier. And then you have 3 types now of letters. Now, you have 2D, which will just make flat text. It'll be infinitely thin. It'll just be like as if a vector version of your text is floating in space, just flat. 3D will create the same effect as 3D creased, except with the fact that, as before in the primitive object section, where one of the boxes that was created with synthetic had a hard edge and one had a hard edge but was being smooth visually, if you choose 3D, it'll still have a hard edge, bevel, and sides, but it will smooth across them. Whereas 3D crease will add the double points per edge to give you that nice hard edge. So if you want hard edge on your font, use 3D creased. That is for 3D fonts. It's what I use the most. I hardly ever use 3D just because you get this rounded edge, even though the edge isn't round, which in some cases isn't really what you want. So I'm going to leave it 3D creased. And now you have also this section called hierarchy. Now, hierarchy is how the letters of the object are put together. If it's flat, it makes the whole logo itself one object. And let me go ahead and do that so you can see. So now here it's created the text, and you can see it is one object here in the scene. Now, if I were to go ahead and create another bit of text, we'll do the same thing. Choose Century Gothic, bold, and I choose separate. Now look at what the difference is. This particular, and I didn't change my depth, the depth was at 50, so it's really deep, but this one is one object. If I scroll through my objects here, you'll see that lynda.com here is one object. Now you'll notice that this one here is individual objects. As I select them here, you can see that they're individual objects, so I can animate these as individual pieces. And this comes in handy if you want to do an animated logo and you want all the letters to fly in from off screen and then line it back up. So you could create a keyframe for all these pieces at this frame and then move them off the screen and have them fly back in, that sort of thing. Now, there's one other option, and we'll do this again. lynda.com. Make it Century Gothic, bold, and I'll remember to make this 12 again. Now if I choose hierarchy and hit OK, now what this has done is you'll notice that the L here, the very first letter, has an arrow next to it, and that's because what has happened is it said, okay, I want to have a hierarchy because I want to still be able to move all these objects as one entity, but I still want them separate so I can animate them. So as I turn this little arrow down, you'll notice that all the other letters are kind of in a sub menu of the L, and that's because they are parented to the L, which means they are child objects. They are attached to the L, and they will inherit any of the movements that the L gets, any of the scale, the movements, and etc. So if I were to move the L now, you see that all the letters move with the L. Whereas if I go ahead and choose something like, say, the dot here, and move it, it moves independently because it's the child, but then if I move the L again, let me go ahead and deselect it. If I move the L now, you'll notice that it moves with it because it's attached. So that's the difference between choosing flat or separate or hierarchy in this setting. So just keep in mind when you start to do this that the way that these work and what would best fit the type of animation or logo design that you're working on. So now the nice thing about the fact that text is being created here in Amorphium and that we made it kind of a dense mesh, the nice thing about this is that all the tools that you would use for any object can be used on the text. So if I come into effects here and wanted to modify the text, like say maybe bend it, and keep in mind that since bend works in a vertical manner here, it works but from bending from the bottom and bending the top around, I need to rotate my text in the direction I want it to be. But now I can bend the text. So any of the distortions that I want to do to this with inside here, whether it be a bend or even say something like a bulge, where I want to give, you know, kind of a different effect to the text, or maybe bulge it in the other way, all those distorts will work with the text just as like any other object. So you can have animate all these and actually be able to do some cool text effects to your objects. And so of course your brush tools will work in here as well. So if you wanted to, you know, smudge the logo around to get a different type of feel, you can do that as well. And that's basically how you would import and create text within Amorphium.